So hello everyone and welcome to another edition of GraphOps. This is LOH number 18 and today is 6th of June. Today is not 6th of June, today is June 19th, 2024. I feel like I'm in the past a bit, but I'm in the present now. So on the agenda today, as always, Launchpad Development since last LOH, and then we will continue with the Loki namespace coming up update. We will talk a bit about, in general, about Pods quality of service and how to ensure that, just very briefly, and then we will move on to Firehose chart, where we are with the development of it, and hopefully getting some feedback, and then more open questions. Okay, so updates since last Launchpad, LOH. We have had new releases of Lighthouse, ProxyD, Arbitrum Nitro, and Heimdall charts, and we have added a new chart. This is Subgraph Availability Oracle chart that is currently in use by ourselves in production and also Semiotic. It seems to work great. I haven't had the chance to do a latest rollout of Lighthouse. This would be Lighthouse since actually, yes, I think there was a one last week and that has been rolled out. Yeah, that one has been rolled out, but anything that has been rolled out this week, we're short-staffed and I haven't had the chance to roll out the new versions. Then we also have new Launchpad namespaces for monitoring Arbitrum and Polygon. Okay. We have a small update for you regarding Loki. Ian, are you able to talk?
Hello, can you hear me?
Perfect, yes.
You can. Hi everyone. So we're rolling out Loki 3 into Launchpad namespaces from the 2.9.x release. For anybody that's already using 2.9.x, there are a couple of things that you have to do in order to migrate, but there are a few benefits to doing so. We'd actually run into a long-standing bug with the deployment reaching ended up in a kind of sort of unrestartable state, which is basically solved in Loki 3. There's also schema changes and a few other cool improvements, generally much more performant as well. The actual deployment topology has changed slightly as well. There's plenty of detailed information, the links on those slides that we've got, Hannah, wherever they are.
They're here, yeah.
But apart from that, I mean, what I would say is that anybody that's using the previous version that needs any pointers on the migration process, then obviously reach out to us and we'll do our best to guide you through that.
So I will add to, thank you, Ian. I would add to what Ian said that we haven't yet fully rolled out the new namespace version with V3. We're still ironing out some issues, some defaults and stuff like that. Yeah, maybe when it's ironed out, we'll give more details on on the change in deployment architecture and everything you need to know. One thing that
Yeah,
yes,
so that was sorry, Anna, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
no,
Gonna,
go ahead.
I was just
Go ahead.
responding to Gabriel in the comments. Yeah, so it looks like the Loki distributed Helm chart. I'm not sure if they're going to update it to version 3 or not, because it seems to be slightly behind the development cycle. So that this was this endeavor was partly switching over from Loki distributed to the Loki chart, effectively in distributed mode. So it's a bit fiddly to do, but it's kind of like a one shot kind of thing. Once you're done with a slightly sort of fiddly changeover in the charts, then fairly smooth running from there.
And what are the biggest breaking changes?
I think the main thing is the deprecation of the V12 schema and the BoltDB shipper. So it's TSDB by default now. So anybody, if you weren't already using that as the driver, then that's the default. And there's also a new schema, V13 schema, which is much more performant for structured logging. But you can carry on using V12 schema. You just have to configure it to turn that off. So you can kind of migrate in stages if that's easier. As I said, that's kind of the process we're kind of going through at the moment. In like sort of, as Anna said, sort of internally with moving from a sort of 2.9.6 or 2.9.8 might have even been our release on Launchpad namespaces, using the Loki distributed chart to the Loki chart. So yeah, definitely got a little bit of experience in terms of stepping through that, because some of the config changes are, although it isn't major, it is a little bit fiddly to configure those changes and migrate over without any disruption. And yeah, those are the handy links for the in-depth, if anybody's interested in depth. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so Gabriel, if you're looking to update, let us know and we can provide some support there. Okay, so next thing on the agenda. So we wanted to quickly touch on the general pods quality of service in Kubernetes. So by default, pods can be assigned different quality of service based so different quality of service. So this is best effort, burstable, and guaranteed. So best effort refers to when you assign a pod no resource constraint, so no request and no limits. Burstable applies when a resource request is not equal to resource limits, and guaranteed applies to when all containers have resource request constraint. So you apply resource requests and resource limits, and those are equal, they have the same value. So the quality of service category a pod falls into affects how the resources are reserved or not on a node, and also things such as which pods are more likely to be evicted first in the case of lack of resources. So usually best effort pods are the ones that would be evicted first, followed by burstable, and then finally guaranteed. In addition to this, there is so by default Kubernetes kubelet uses a CFS, which is completely fair schedule process. It is the process that's currently embedded in Linux for allocating CPU for maximizing CPU utilization and allocating CPU for executing processes. And this is what enforces pod CPU limits. However, when a node runs many CPU-bound pods, the workload can move to different CPU cores depending on whether the pod is throttled and depending on which cores are available at scheduling time. So by default, many workloads are not sensitive to this migration and work fine without intervention. However, I think it's important to cover this because with running blockchain nodes, which are very data intensive, a lot of the storage would be assigned to a specific node, which means that you need to ensure that the pod is running where it needs to. So by default, kubelet has two different CPU manager policies. So none is the default one, or you can select a static CPU manager policy, which allows pods with certain resource characteristics to be granted increased CPU affinity and exclusivity on the node, and allows containers in guaranteed pods quality of service with the integer CPU requests access to exclusive CPUs on nodes. So this is enforced using the CPU set C group controller. In addition, let's move slides. So for the static CPU manager policy, you can enable that by passing the CPU manager policy kubelet flag. And then for the static CPU manager policy, it actually has additional policy options that is worth looking into, and we have some links for that. But one that might be worth looking in for our users is full pCPUs only, which always allocates full physical cores and not the SMT virtual cores. So you can ensure your pods that have guaranteed quality of service, assign full physical cores by enabling these options. And if this option is enabled, the pod will be admitted by the kubelet only if the CPU requests of all containers can be fulfilled by allocating full physical cores. Otherwise, the pod will be put into a fail state with the message SMT alignment error. Important to know, when using this static CPU manager policy, kubelet should leave some reserved cores for the system. And we're just mentioning this because we're looking into adding this into our Kubernetes cluster, and we thought that as we're learning more about this, it'll be good to share. Yeah, I don't know if anyone here has any information about this or you looked into it, but this was the gist of it.
Yeah, I mean, in our current environment, I don't think we're using that. I don't know if anybody played with it in Kubernetes, but in our LXC containers, we're not using it. Currently, it's using the Matthew scheduler, or the we define which containers run on which machine, so we don't exceed the amount of CPU available, or change the BIOS settings in the machine to turn off the fake CPU cores. So you only get real CPU cores depending on what kind of load is on the machine. So that's currently how we're handling. But I'm glad you're thinking about this.
Sorry, the Matthew scheduler, it means you're doing it manually, right? So you're not
exactly
using any labels or well, yeah, we are trying to optimize our setup to achieve, I guess, an automatic Matthew scheduler. But we will keep on updating as we learn more and as we're toying with this.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what you figure out, because when I previously talked to other Kubernetes people, I'm like, how do we schedule the load on machines based on disk IO patterns? And they're like, oh, you can't do that with Kubernetes. Like, okay. So we can do RAM, we can do CPU. So thanks for explaining the CPU one. But at the end of the day, if you put 5 BSCs on one machine with shared disks, it's not going to go well. Even if there's enough CPU cores or RAM. So
I've made the note.
Interested how this goes.
Yes, I made a note to follow up on disk IO patterns to see if we can.
Because the problem is you don't know what the disk IO pattern is before you don't deploy it, and then you deploy it, and then it's like, well, now this disk is overloaded. So I don't know. It's a challenge. Anyway, the person I talked to, like, this was 2 years ago, said, "Oh yeah, you can't handle that in Kubernetes." So, but it may have improved since then, or maybe they didn't know what they were talking about. So, who knows?
We'll follow up and see if we can, update next LOH.
Okay, that's cool. Because our current rollout plan is to roll out non-blockchain nodes on Kubernetes first and leave the blockchain nodes last, because of this problem and other, scheduling challenges. You are well aware of what they are.
Yeah. Okay.
So it hasn't been a priority for us to look into this stuff.
As I said, we are exploring this, and we will keep on updating as we come up with more and more conclusions, and we'll probably share our final setup. Right now, we're just doing a spike on it to figure out, just exploration mode.
Cool.
Right. Next thing on the agenda is, and this is why I need a soundboard, but the Firehose. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly let you know what the current features of Firehose chart are, and then we'll actually go into what we have deployed, and we can look at the configuration, and maybe we can get just feedback and stuff. So the way we've deployed the chart, it has opt-in and out of all Firehose components, so you can enable or disable all of the components or just one, depending on how you want to deploy it. We have added service monitors for scraping Firehose and get metrics for Prometheus, and that is working well. The config flags for each component are computed with common flags set up by default, and then individual component level overrides. And this will work well when we add Launchpad namespaces for Firehose, so that we'd have multiple flavors for each chain. And then we also have specific compute get config flags for the reader nodes, again with default and individual, they shouldn't say component level, individual chain level overrides. And then we have added the ability to scale replicas for high availability for reader, for gRPC, and for the relayer. And we have added the ability to overwrite service ports in values, and that would compute them for both the services and the different deployment or stateful set for each component. We have added P2P support, but it's not fully tested yet. And so we have all of this plus everything that comes with our normal Launchpad charts, and things that we still need to add. So dashboards, ability for snapshots, and then we also want to add a FireEat toolbox container, similar to how we have the graph node toolbox, where you can easily, the idea is to easily run all of the FireEat tools. It's like a FireEat tools abstraction. Before I show you what we have, I just wanted a brief discussion about dashboards, if you guys have any, and if you would be up for sharing them. And also snapshots. I know I asked and I didn't follow up on the discussion. But yeah, do you have any dashboards?
Yes.
Would you share them?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And for the
we
snapshots,
can go through them. We can go through them here if you want.
Okay.
Show and tell.
Yes, we can. If you give me a dashboard link, I can add it to our Prometheus, to our Grafana to see what we can. Where we are. And then for snapshots, I know Matthew, you said that they change constantly.
Well, I mean, you need new snapshots on a regular basis, right? So you have a latest one, if that's what you mean by change constantly.
So yeah, but if we could get the whatever latest snapshots you have, then I can add that functionality into the chart and I can test that it works well. So yeah, that would be really useful. Aside from those two and adding the FireEat toolbox, I'll share my setup. Before I share it, I will let you know that I've concentrated mostly on the development, with all of the config being computed properly and getting everything. So the chart development, so there's still some small issues with the components. So for example, I'm not seeing any blocks in the reader node. So can you see my terminal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here you can see the so gRPC, indexer, merger, reader, and relayer, and Nimbus. We've been using Nimbus as a consensus layer, but Lighthouse will work as well. I don't know if there's a specific recommendation for Lighthouse. We can easily switch because that's just using the charts we already have.
No, there's no specific recommendation for Lighthouse. Lighthouse is just the one I picked. Like when we were having to do consensus layers, it's like, I don't know. Lighthouse looks good. That was the decision process.
I think that's how we did it for Nimbus. Like Nimbus seems easy enough. So in terms of how each one of these pods are started is using a config map. So for example, I'm taking the reader node as an example. So args reader node, then the Firehose flags, and then the actual reader node arguments. A lot of these are computed. But yeah, this is the setup. And then for each one, so for indexer, you'd have just the Firehose flags. For merger, you'd have args, merger, Firehose flags, and so on. Let me quickly show, so Launchpad. Okay. So in terms of how we're computing the arguments.
Just a quick question. Is there a reason why like numbers you've made into strings by putting quotes around everything? Or
You mean here?
yeah, like
Or
we don't really need a quotes around, like common index block sizes. I mean, I don't know.
mm-hmm. I think it's the way it's so we have this helper that merges the config. The config comes from 3 different places. So we have this top level config that contains these flags, and then each
Yeah, see, because it just
component.
says like 10,000 there. It doesn't say quote 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, just style. That's
Does
what
it?
I'm asking.
I think it might matter for example, something like gRPC listen address because of the what is this called? The 2 dots.
Colon.
I forget the colon. Thank you. But does it matter for the Firehose configuration? Let me see how it's rendered. Yeah, it's rendered.
I mean, the only thing we use quotes on is the Firehose reader arguments, which is like, that massively huge long thing. Otherwise, we don't use quotes on anything. So I don't know. It probably works, but I don't know.
I know it works because I've seen the configs being applied. But yeah, I agree with Vince. It would, without codes, it would, I think it would break the config. Yes, so you can add, so we have the common config at the top level, and then we have each component config, and then you can also overwrite it. So for example, in our Helm file, here you can additionally overwrite the configs. This should be 15. That was just for testing. And then for the reader config, we have the extra arguments in addition to what's already computed. So you can add the free flow arguments for the reader, or you have all of these computed arguments as well that the user can override. Some of the defaults for this can have to still be decided upon, but the way it works, the mechanism in which everything is added together is already there.
So this is just working for GEIF-based configs,
yes,
right?
for
If you're
EVM,
using
yeah.
if you're using Nitro, or you're using, OP Stack or Aragon, or whatever else, these flags are all different. Right, so EVM chains come with lots of different binaries that you might need to invoke, which may or may not have these flags.
Yes. So this is where there's still some work to be done. So deciding on which one of these need to be computed. So for example, I think network ID is in all of them. HTTP RPC may be common. The metrics.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use network ID often. We just use the network name.
So you don't need both?
No.
Okay.
Also, I
will
would recommend putting in, it's kind of just a variable to the label, I guess. Or maybe you would just add it somewhere. But you want a blocks version because when they have like a big upgrade and you have to merge the blocks and you have like a V1 and then a V2, like you kind of want those pods labeled what they are.
Sure.
So like when you're running them in parallel, like before you bring down V1, you bring up V2 and then you're like, okay, V2 is good. Then you can shut down V1.
For sure. I hadn't got that far in my comments.
Sorry, let me just, I'm not sure if I fully follow that. That blocks version, would that be at pod level or is it a configuration?
It's basically
after
just like a labeling of it, because it's a self-assigned thing. It doesn't have to be V1. It can be whatever you want to call it. You can call it alpha, beta, doesn't matter. Just
And a
as long as it
favorite
tracks.
thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just whatever you want to call it, but it's just for a labeling so you know what blocks version you have, because then when you're storing them in another place, like you know what to connect to. Because like in our infrastructure, we have, well, we use Ceph, but we have blocks and they're labeled all V1, all V2, so that when we're running V2 or V3 or V4, whatever it is, like I think Polygon in our stack is up to like V5 or V6. You know which one to run to store that in a bucket or local storage or whatever. It's just kind of a labeling thing, to when you have a breaking state change in Firehose. You need to kind of keep track of what blocks version. I don't know a better name for it, but I just call it blocks version.
So would this happen at pod level then? Like with that an additional label of
like a
that
pod
contains...
label, but also
Okay.
like you want everything else to follow it. So the service and the ingress and whatever, you want all that to track, because you're going to be running multiple of them. So like if I have all V1 and I'm like, oh, it's broken, now I need to have V2. You want all of those running at the same time before you shut down the old one.
Okay. I'll have a think on how to add that.
The other thing I'll throw at you, since we're here, is sometimes you want to run the reader and the merger in one container. So when you're doing initial syncing, you don't want to load all the one block files into the S3 bucket and then download them all from the merger. This is very expensive from storage perspective. So you want to run the reader and the merger together, and then just the merge blocks get uploaded in that case. So it's a different configuration where reader and merger run together. And when you're doing that, you're typically not running the remaining components.
Okay,
so reader batch mode or something.
Making notes.
Yeah, this is kind of why I went with the approach I did, with kind of just giving the user complete writability of the config and laying some responsibility on the user, because like there's so much variance in everything, that I wanted something to where I can, if I wanted to run Bitcoin or Fire ETH or whatever I want to run, I can just change the image tag, put the reader config flags that I want, and it just shoves it into a config template, or it just shoves it into a config map, and then everything works. Because I think it's going to be very difficult to maintain something that has so much variance and putting some onus on the user.
So the last example with being able to, for example, run a specific image with specific config flags, that is possible. The only thing that's not possible right now is running reader and merger in one container.
Well, they don't have to be in one container, but they need to be, using a common local file store.
Okay.
Right, they can still be 2 containers. We don't run them. We run them as 1 container, but that's not a requirement. The goal is to just not upload all those files to S3. Because you just kill the S3 server.
So that makes sense. So then
So if it's
one
in
way
1
to doing
container,
this,
then you can just write it into, like whatever the local, wherever you write stuff locally.
so the way I see it is in one container or on the same node, sharing one like a volume
Yeah, exactly.
where they both read and write from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're just going to run that for a short amount of time, and then poof, it will go away once it catches up to live blocks, and you deploy the whole thing, in kind of production mode. So if you want to think of it, there's like initial deployment mode where we need to sync the chain, the last 7 years of data, blah, 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 get snapshots, restore things, whatever. And then, okay, everything is good now. Great. Now we're going to deploy the full productions rollout where, we set up all the ingress and, distributed and scale the cluster. Or at least that's how I think about it. You may, in Kubernetes land, maybe you don't have to distinguish those 2 things, but I typically think about there's the initial deployment phase for Firehose where you're syncing the chains, and then there's the production. Okay, it's ready. And then,
yeah, I think
Vince brought up the version thing. So, because sometimes, well, there's a new version, great. So now you go back to the initial deployment stage for the new version, and then you get that up to speed, and then, okay, now we're ready for production for the new version, and then we delete the old cluster, make it go away.
I think that makes sense. I'll have to do more testing to see if if we can just start with syncing where it reads from the same place, from the same file system for both merger and reader, and then switches to S3. But I don't see why the rest of it, so the service, the ingress, all of that, would need to wait for that. It just basically, if the service is not ready, then it would not serve anything. It would just, that part of the system would not work.
Correct. As long as you suppress all the alerts that are complaining that the thing is not ready, because it might take a couple of weeks and I don't want a pile of alerts in my dashboard.
That is a good point.
Yeah, the only main thing I was talking about, like the service and the ingress, is just the naming, because like when you're running them in parallel, you're going to have Ethereum blocks version 1 service, Ethereum blocks version 2 service. So you can like quickly identify, if I'm troubleshooting, is it my service? Is it my ingress? You know which blocks version you're trying to fix. And then I think for this use case, maybe that Fire toolbox you were talking about would be a really good use case. Like taking it out of the whole chart and maybe putting that in the toolbox, because that's only something you really do at the start, and then you kind of let the full help chart take over.
Yeah, I mean, we just need to think about what's the best way to approach this bootstrap problem. So there's a few different ways.
So if I just go back for a second, and this is where maybe I'm still learning about Firehose, so bear with me. So I've started my deployment 36 hours ago because I deleted everything and restarted. And
yeah, so you're syncing from Genesis?
No, I haven't added any Genesis configuration. Well, no, yeah.
Like you didn't get a snap? Did you get a snapshot?
I did not know. So I'm thinking, yeah.
Oh, then you're syncing from
the
Genesis.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So my so Nimbus is running, is syncing, and it has 5 days to go. My reader is running, but
it's waiting
it
for
shows.
Nimbus to sync. Yeah, it's waiting for Nimbus to finish syncing.
So I
You
was
can add
gonna
that
double check on that.
flag. You can add that Nimbus flag, and it'll automatically sync in like 2 seconds.
You mean the trusted node flag?
I don't remember if it's trusted node, but you can basically add. It's the thing where you can add the external beacon, and it will. Yeah, but it's basically a trusted node. Yeah, I don't recall what the flag is called, but it'll make Nimbus sync up in like 3 minutes.
Yes, so I do have that, but maybe I need to check that this works. Maybe this has changed, but it hasn't done that. So this configuration is enabled. You can even see, let's see.
Yeah, so Geeth will not sync anything until the consensus layer is ready.
Okay.
In the older versions of Geeth, like if you go download a Geeth from a year ago, it will sync. You don't have to wait. If you use the modern Geeth, then they need to wait for the consensus layer to be in sync. It's a bit annoying the way it's designed at the moment, but anyway. Not too many people run Firehose, so it makes sense why they made that decision. This is a Geeth decision that has nothing to do with Firehose.
So that's good to know because I wasn't 100% sure if that was something, if there was a misconfiguration. I can very quickly.
I know this is the case because lots of people have asked the exact same question. I set everything up and then it's not syncing any blocks. Why? Is your consensus synced? No. Well, wait. And then they go away and then I don't hear back from them. So I assume that will fix it.
Okay, we don't have one here. I'm just trying to find the right link to see if I can really quickly sync the consensus layer. So let's go to Ethereum. Common. It's not here. It must be.
What's interesting is if you start trying to sync optimism, you actually need a consensus layer that has synced from Genesis, which actually has all the blobs in it.
Yeah, I believe I think you're correct on the thing. It's supposed to be trusted -node -URL.
Yes, but the chart is computing that.
Yeah, I don't mean that. I just mean when it actually lands in your config map, that's what it should be.
Yes, so something's missing here. Let's see.
Just a quick side note. What are you pressing to do that? Because that looks very helpful.
Right, so pressing colon to specify the name of the resource. And,
yeah, that's what I usually do.
And then pressing slash.
Slash. Okay, thank you.
To copy, yeah. Also, there's with question mark. Let's see. You can see all of the.
Oh, amazing! Thank you.
So it's this question mark help. Okay, now if I can figure out. Let's go back to pods. If I can figure out Nimbus. So we have container starts with points at the reader, blah, blah, blah.
Kubernetes is too complicated. Too many YAMLs.
Too many what, sorry?
Too many YAMLs.
But isn't it complicated when you do it on bare metal? Like, won't you have to the same config everywhere? As in the same complexity?
No. Our existing system is less complex. I can tell you without looking exactly where everything is defined for every single chain.
Well, I know where everything is defined. I just need to find the configuration for it. So I think what happened here, maybe,
He's
is
also cheating. He has Matthew magic.
Correct.
there
It's
you go.
scripted. It's, when you have something generic, then it obviously is more verbose. When it's specific to the implementation, then it's a lot, less YAMLs, more magic.
So I think what happened here is I do have that trusted node set up. I just showed it to you. But I think I have redeployed and maybe I haven't deleted the PVC. So it just went and checked for that that thing existed, that folder. And if it did, it sort of stopped syncing. So I'm just gonna do this to delete that release. Grep Firehose Nimbus. So listing the release name, we'll delete it and we'll try again. I'm very aware that we're sort of running out of time. So while I do that, where can I go and find your point on some of the flags? So for example, here, I have added this as a list of get. A lot of them I'm planning to move away, to move so that they're not hard-coded. But what would be common flags for all of the EVM chains?
I posted a link. That's to Gnosis, but it's genuinely the same. Besides, because I think it's because you do have trusted node sync. If you take a look at my link to the docs, it's for Gnosis, but it's the same general setup, but your checkpoint is going to be different, obviously, because it's Gnosis. But other than that, that's the flags to run it. Oh, you're talking about the reader. Oh,
Yeah, but for example, Polygon doesn't use GWT secrets.
Yeah.
Yes. So
or I don't know which ones use Firehose enabled. I don't know. We could go look at
So
all of our flags. I can send you all the ones we have if you want to have a poke at them, because that might give you some info.
I think if you could just to finish the chat. So we want only the common flags to be added in this list, and everything else would be computed or added by the user, like I've added here, or added into a namespace's flavor. So those one will need to. I still need to do some work there. Going back to your comment.
Yeah. I was just gonna add, like, in a previous setup that we had in our infrastructure, we had like a whole bunch of, well, like Ian's talking about, more magic. We actually had a bit too much magic because it made it not understandable for the user what they were getting. So they were trying to configure things, and then they're like what's going on? So we just reverted back to the just pass all the arguments you want to the Firehose reader, and even though it's copy paste between every single chain, at least it's actually understandable. And so we went with more readability and less magic in this case. So I don't know. There's no perfect answer, right? So
Yeah, I'm thinking if the way in which you look at the config map, where it shows all of the arguments that have been added, is enough readability. That's where the pause was coming from. And sorry, Vince, I do have all of that trusted node. So I have a initial container that first runs trusted node sync.
yeah.
But I think it is what I've said that I need to quickly delete this. Because yeah, so if I redeployed it and it didn't delete the PVC, then it would have looked into that storage directory, seen some data, and said, oh, okay, there's data already there, so I'm just going to skip. So I've deleted this. Let me check PVC. Okay. Okay, so now if I run task again, it should add that release again, and hopefully it will sync. And while that runs, so this is what I meant, Matthew, by readability. I'm just thinking that maybe looking at this config map and seeing exactly what is computed is enough readability.
Oh yeah, that's great. When you see it at the end, then it's perfect, right? But as long as it's clear where each of the things is coming from, then you're good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see here. This is that one change I added. So yeah, if you would be okay with sharing some of the config for other chains, then
I will share
be
all the configs for all the chains, and then you can take what you like.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Apart from what you mentioned about the block version and being able to handle that somehow, and the ability to have reader and merger share a common local file store to begin with.
Yeah, so the other part of that story with the local file store to begin with is something we discussed at the offsite in October, where if you have multiple snapshots at multiple different block heights, then what you want to do is you want to schedule multiple reader merger combinations from each one of those snapshots, and assuming you have enough infrastructure, of course, and run all those in parallel. So that way you're generating the Firehose blocks, in chunks, and you don't have to start from Genesis like you're doing here and then wait, 6 months. Well, it's not going to take 6 months, but Ethereum is a small chain, so it would only take, maybe 3 weeks or 2 weeks to sync everything from Genesis up to live. So if you've got snapshots at various points in time, then you can chunk up the work and you can get your Firehose blocks a lot faster. So that's the kind of pattern you want to have with the reader merger little mini setup.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I will start working on that, and I will probably. This says. I will come with a lot of questions.
Absolutely. Please come with a lot of questions. I
I'm
would
just quickly
I would
checking.
like you to ask questions rather than building something and then we come with comments later and you go, oh, I wish you had told me. So please ask.
Okay, will do. I hope this has been useful. Thank you for the feedback, and please share with me all of those things so I can continue working. And yeah, we'll keep on sharing all of the everything we've been working on.
I will throw some files in the S3 bucket and you can download them.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. This is all we had for today. Thank you for coming.
Cool. I love seeing the progress. Excellent. Awesome.
Yeah, it feels good to finally get down and working on it and understanding it. It's a beast, but I feel like the fog is very slowly clearing away every day.
I think that's the normal process to learn Firehose. You look at it when you start and you go, what? I don't understand at all. So I don't know. Vince, you went through this most recently on our team. So I don't know. I think it took you a few months before you're like, this makes sense. Or
well, I think it was a combination of things. It was Kubernetes, and then on top of that, then it was no help charts, and then that was starting small, doing block meta, and then it was okay, let's do an RPC now, let's do Firehose now, and then the really understanding Firehose took some time, but actually building out the Helm chart like really, really helps you understand it because you need to know what talks to what and why, and it just really helps because you can watch a presentation all day long, and even if you're intently listening, it's still like a week later you're like, what? How does that work?
Yeah,
it's like if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I think you said this already, but right now your Firehose is running on LXC containers, right?
correct.
And the work you've shared, Vince, on that Firehose Ethereum chart, you're using that?
The Firehose, no. The substreams, we are. I was kind of like halfway through rewriting my Firehose chart, and then you guys said you were working on it, so I kind of wanted to let you kind of pick apart because that was more of a basic one. So I kind of started working on substreams, and I got that in a good place now. Same with block meta. But I kind of stopped on the Firehose part because I wanted to see, where you guys were at with Launchpad and stuff, and then kind of, work on that with you if you needed any help or combine our efforts in any way. I just didn't want to do double the work between two teams.
No, that makes sense. Yes, I will. The last question is, where is it best to ask questions, Discord or on our Graph of Spinax? I've been going for Discord because in case the questions I asked are useful for other people later on, but just
Discord is good. So other people, I'm totally fine with that. If you want to ask something private, feel free to use Slack. Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I
Thank you.
taught Payne and Alexis from Semiotic how to use, Firehose, basically just index your Firehose channel. Right. So that's how they learned. They just asked me questions.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why I was going there as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But okay, cool. We will keep up to date. I will be away for 5 days, but after that, basically Firehose and SAO are my main focuses right now. So we'll keep on going with progress here. So yeah, thank you for your time, and I will see you